Hi everyone, it's Rachel, and in this video I'll be showing you how to make a Kawaii Narwhal in a shell using polymer clay and UV resin. So let's get started. So to begin, find a shell that you would like to use to make your design in. These ones that I have here are just craft shells that I bought from the store. You then want to take the colour for your narwhal and roll it into a ball for the body, and then just go ahead and test it to make sure that it fits inside the shell. Next, we are going to create the belly, so roll a piece of clay into a teardrop and flatten this down onto your work surface, and then just place it onto the narwhal's body at the bottom. To make the fins, take 2 small balls of clay the same colour as the rest of the body, so you can see here that I've got my lilac colour, and roll each of these balls into teardrops, and then with your blade you can go ahead and cut off the pointed end, which is the part that we will be using. You can then very carefully position these onto either side of the body, and you can also blend them on so that they're nice and secure. Moving on to the face, I'm firstly creating 2 indents where I want the eyes to go, and then I'm adding in 2 balls of dark brown clay. I also added a small U shape of clay in the center for the mouth, and then I'm also adding on 2 pink balls of clay on either side for the cheeks. Next, we want to create the narwhal's horn, so I took some gold polymer clay for mine, and I rolled this clay on my work surface into a point, and then I just trimmed it to the size that I wanted and attached it right on the front of the narwhal's head. I'm now creating some of the little details that will also be going into the shell. So for the little green kind of seaweed or moss part, I'm just using my needle tool to scrape off some little pieces of green clay, which I will go ahead and bake. I'm now moving on to making the little water lilies or the flowers that will also be going into the shell. So to begin, I'm rolling out a small piece of this pinky purple coloured clay, and I'm flattening it down, and then I'm just folding it over, and this will become the centre of my flower. So it looks something like this. I then need to cut off some even sized sections for the rest of the petals, so I'm going to be using 3 small petals, 3 medium sized petals, and then 5 larger petals on each of my flowers. So to shape all of my petals, I started off with the clay in a small ball, and then I just rolled this into a teardrop on my work surface. I then just pressed it down, and then I'm using my pointed silicone tool and I'm pressing this into the clay as well. This does kind of squash the clay down a little bit, so I just like to neaten up the shape a little with my blade, and then here's what the petal looks like. So I just repeated this step for every single petal. Then it's time to construct the flower, so here I'm beginning by adding on my 3 smallest petals and then followed by my 3 medium-sized petals. And you can see that I have my flower just resting on my needle tool, so that way I can easily move it around without accidentally ruining the shape or having to handle it with my fingers. The final step is collecting the 5 largest petals and positioning them into a flower shape on my work surface, and I'm just pressing them together so that they stay connected. I then curled up the edge of each of these simply using my blade, and then I took my other piece that I was working on and I cut off the really pointy base part that was pretty much just excess clay, and then I'm connecting the 2 pieces together to form my complete flower. The final step of making my flowers is just dusting on some pink chalk pastel shavings just around the larger petals to make them look a little bit more realistic. So once you're happy with everything, it's then time to bake your clay in your oven according to your package's instructions. After baking, we want to go ahead and create the water that will go in our shell. So I'm going to be using some UV resin, and here you can just see that I'm mixing in a small amount of blue liquid pigment. Once I was happy with the colour, I then poured a small amount into my shell and I kind of spread it around just by tilting the shell. I then took my little narwhal and I placed him inside, and I just worked on positioning him exactly how I wanted before then curing this layer of UV resin with my UV light. Once the narwhal is held in place with the resin, I then chose to glaze it, and I'm just using some clear UV resin, which is what I usually use to glaze my charms, and then of course I also put this under my UV light as well. It was then time to add another layer of blue UV resin, which I will be using to secure in the flowers and all the little green pieces as well. So here I'm just using my tweezers and I'm placing everything around the narwhal where I want, and just trying to kind of keep it fairly balanced and not too heavily decorated on one side more than the other. Finally, I decided that I wanted to add a little bit of sparkle to my narwhal's horn. So what I've done here is put a blob of resin just on a sheet of baking paper, and then I'm also mixing in some gold holographic powder, which I'm then just brushing straight onto the narwhal's horn using my paintbrush that I use for UV resin. You could of course also add some glitter to the horn before you bake the clay, but I decided to add mine afterwards purely because I only decided that's what I wanted to do right at the end. So there you have it. That is how you can create your very own little kawaii narwhal in a shell. I really love this creation and the colors, and I just think everything kind of comes together really well. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel for lots more crafty videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye guys.